25 years at Hartman Legal, never missed a deadline. Then on the afternoon I was set to close the biggest energy deal of my career. I got fired by someone who couldn't spell fiduciary just because her last name matched the one on the building. What she didn't know was I was the only reason 63 Fortune 500 clients stayed, and she just handed me the keys to her own destruction. My name is Robert Matthews, and at 52, I'd built my entire identity around being the most reliable corporate lawyer at Hartman Legal. That Friday afternoon started like any other. Coffee at 6:30, desk by 7, reviewing the Caldwell Industries acquisition documents for what had to be the 30th time. $85 million. Not our biggest deal, but significant enough that I'd personally shepherded it through 6 months of negotiations. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been discussing this exact deal with Patricia Caldwell over lunch at River Oaks Country Club just 3 days earlier. We'd been sitting on the terrace overlooking the 18th green, and she'd mentioned how much the board appreciated having someone they could trust with their most complex transactions. "Rob, you know how many lawyers I've worked with over the years," she'd said, cutting into her salmon. "Most of them treat us like a transaction number. You actually understand our business." That conversation felt like a lifetime ago now, staring at the email notification that popped up at 4:15 p.m. Not from my direct supervisor, Thomas, who was in depositions all week, from Ashley Hartman. "Please come to my office immediately. Ashley, 29 years old, Wharton MBA, daughter of our founding partner." She'd been installed as Chief Operating Officer 8 weeks ago after what the firm newsletter called a comprehensive strategic review. The review that somehow missed every qualified candidate and landed on the boss's daughter who'd spent the last 3 years disrupting yoga studios in Austin. I'd actually tried to give her the benefit of the doubt initially. Her presentation to the partners about modernizing client relations had some valid points about digital communication and efficiency. But then she'd started talking about paradigm shifts and leveraging synergistic opportunities, and I'd realized we were in trouble. I saved my work, straightened my tie, and walked the long hallway to the corner office that used to belong to a partner with 40 years of experience. Ashley had redecorated completely. Gone were the law books and framed certificates, replaced by motivational posters about embracing change and a meditation corner with crystals that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She didn't look up when I knocked. "Sit." The chair across from her desk was deliberately low, a power play I'd seen in amateur management books. Ashley was scrolling through her phone, designer sneakers propped on the mahogany desk her father had imported from Italy. Her boyfriend Devin sat in the corner, supposedly taking notes on his laptop, though I could see the reflection of what looked like a video game in his glasses. "Robert," she finally acknowledged me, setting down her phone with visible irritation. "We need to discuss your trajectory here. Is there an issue with the Caldwell acquisition? I can walk you through the environmental compliance sections if you need clarification on the recent Texas Environmental Code updates. It's not about any specific deal." She leaned back, fingers steepled in what she probably thought was an executive pose. "It's about cultural evolution, generational alignment, the strategic direction we're taking this firm." Cultural evolution. I'd billed more hours than any other non-partner for 5 consecutive years. My client retention rate was 96%. I'd brought in $18 million in new business last year alone, including 3 Fortune 100 companies that had never worked with us before. But sure, let's talk about strategic alignment. I'm not following, Ashley. Look, you're competent. No one's saying you're not competent. The way she said competent made it sound like a character flaw. But Hartman Legal is evolving. We need team players who understand innovation, disruption, people who think outside traditional paradigms. I bit back the urge to mention that law firms succeeded by thinking inside very specific statutory and regulatory frameworks. That's literally what clients paid us for. Expertise in navigating those frameworks without getting them sued, fined, or criminally prosecuted. What exactly are you saying? Today is your last day. Security will escort you out after you sign this. She slid a packet across the desk with the casual indifference of someone ordering coffee. Non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause, 6-month severance if I went quietly. My stomach dropped. "You're firing me the day before Caldwell closes? Devin will handle the transition." She checked her phone again, already mentally moved on from destroying my career. Devin. Her boyfriend from the wellness industry, who'd started 6 weeks ago as a client experience coordinator. A week ago, I'd overheard him asking our paralegal what due diligence meant. The man had a sociology degree and a certificate in mindfulness coaching. Devin isn't licensed to practice law. He can't legally handle client transactions or provide legal advice. That's no longer your concern. Her smile was all teeth, no warmth. You have 1 hour to clear out your office. And Robert, the NDA is non-negotiable. You discuss any client matters, any proprietary information, and we'll bury you in litigation. This firm has very deep pockets. I stood slowly, keeping my face neutral while my mind raced. 25 years. A quarter century of skipped family dinners, working through holidays, building relationships with 63 corporate clients who trusted me with their multi-million-dollar problems. 25 years of creating systems, templates, and processes that this firm ran on. My name wasn't on any public documents, but my expertise was embedded in every major deal. Think about my daughter Sarah's spring tuition payment, $40,000 due in 6 weeks. Think about my son Michael starting at UT in the fall, another $30,000 annually. Think about my mother in the assisted living facility, $3,500 monthly for her care. Think about the alimony payments to my ex-wife that don't stop until I'm 65. All of it dependent on my income, my reputation, my career. 1 hour, Ashley repeated, her attention already back on her phone. Leave your keycard with security. I walked back to my office in a daze. Through the glass walls, I could see my colleagues avoiding eye contact. Word traveled at light speed in law firms. I was toxic now, radioactive. 1 hour to pack up 25 years. I pulled out my personal laptop, the one I'd used for late-night work when the firm's ancient systems crashed. My personal phone, with numbers I'd accumulated over decades of client relationships. My handwritten notes, the kind of institutional knowledge that couldn't be digitized. My reference books with margin notes from hundreds of deals. My coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Dad," a Father's Day gift from Sarah when she was 12. What they couldn't pack into boxes were the relationships I'd built. The personal cell numbers in my phone, the trust earned through countless hours of meticulous work, the industry knowledge accumulated over a quarter century of energy sector deals, regulatory compliance, and crisis management. As security watched me fill bankers' boxes, I thought about Patricia Caldwell, about how their CEO had specifically requested me after I'd saved them from a catastrophic regulatory violation 3 years ago. About how she'd invited me to her son's wedding last spring, about how she had no idea that Monday her $85 million acquisition would be handled by someone whose biggest legal experience was reading wellness blog posts about contract law. I signed the papers, took my boxes, handed over my key card, but as I walked out of Hartman Legal for the last time, past the marble lobby and the commissioned portraits of 3 generations of Hartman lawyers, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what they'd forgotten I still had, and about Tuesday's scheduled meeting of the Houston Energy Bar Association, where 47 of the most powerful lawyers in the oil and gas industry would be very interested to hear why Robert Matthews was suddenly available for new opportunities. I sat in my home office at 5:30 p.m., still wearing my suit, staring at the bankers' boxes like they might explain what had just happened. The house felt too quiet for a Friday evening. My kids were at their mother's place for the weekend, and I should have been celebrating the Caldwell closing with Patricia and her team at the Capitol Grill right now. Instead, I was unemployed with 8 years left until retirement. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something sharper. Not just anger, clarity. I opened my laptop and started taking inventory of what I actually possessed versus what Hartman Legal thought they owned. The non-compete clause was 18 months, but I knew Texas law better than Ashley did. Non-competes were difficult to enforce when termination was without cause, especially when you could prove bad faith. Firing someone to make room for an unqualified boyfriend definitely qualified as bad faith. First, my systems. Over 25 years, I'd developed comprehensive frameworks for energy sector deals, environmental compliance templates, and regulatory change tracking systems. The firm had never asked me to transfer these to their servers, probably because no one there understood their value. They sat in my personal cloud storage, meticulously organized. My intellectual property, created on my own time, refined through hundreds of transactions. Second, the relationships. I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled through the numbers. Patricia Caldwell, Mike Thompson from Lone Star Energy, Sarah Rodriguez at Gulf Coast Holdings. 63 CEOs, CFOs, and general counsels who had my direct line because Hartman Legal's official channels meant waiting 3 days for a callback. These weren't just business cards from networking events. These were relationships built over decades. People who'd invited me to their daughters' weddings, who called for advice on everything from contract terms to their kids' college choices, who trusted me with their corporate secrets because I'd proven myself through years of crisis management and weekend emergency sessions. Third, the industry connections that Ashley clearly didn't understand. Tuesday's Houston Energy Bar Association meeting at the Petroleum Club, the monthly breakfast group of senior energy lawyers at River Oaks Country Club, the annual Texas Energy Law Conference where I'd been a featured speaker for 6 years running. My phone buzzed. Thomas, my former supervisor, texting from inside the firm, heard what happened. Emergency partners meeting Monday. Ashley announced that Devin will transition into senior legal coordinator role. This is insane. I didn't respond. The NDA was vague about personal communications, and I wasn't taking chances. But Thomas's message confirmed what I suspected. Panic was setting in. I spent the weekend researching and strategizing. By Sunday night, I'd transformed my dining room into a war room. 25 years of accumulated knowledge spread across the table, not client files, those belong to Hartman, but my personal notes, my methodologies, my regulatory tracking systems, the infrastructure that had made me indispensable. Monday morning, I created a new email address, R. Matthews Consulting. Not a competing firm, just a professional presence. Updated my LinkedIn to independent legal consultant, energy sector compliance. No mention of Hartman Legal, no violation of any agreement. Then I waited exactly 30 days. That was crucial, showing good faith, proving I wasn't rushing to violate my agreements. During those 30 days, I watched from the sidelines as Hartman Legal began to unravel. Tuesday brought the Houston Energy Bar Association meeting I'd been anticipating. The Petroleum Club's dining room was packed with the usual suspects, 47 of the most influential energy lawyers in Texas. I'd been coming to these monthly gatherings for 15 years. Rob Matthews called out Jim Harrison from Baker Oil and Gas as I walked in. Heard you've got some big news. Word traveled fast in Houston's legal community. Within minutes, I was surrounded by colleagues, all curious about my sudden availability. I kept my responses vague but professional. Exploring new opportunities, I said repeatedly. Sometimes change opens doors you didn't know existed. The real conversations happened during golf the following Saturday at Memorial Park. Mike Coleman from Energy Legal Partners had invited me for their usual foursome. As we stood on the 7th tee, he cut straight to the point. Rob, I've got 3 clients asking if you're available for project work. Nothing that would violate any agreements, just independent consulting on regulatory compliance. By the 12th hole, I'd received similar inquiries from the other 2 lawyers in our group. Word was spreading that Devin's coordination efforts were creating problems, big problems. The first crisis hit during week 2. Sarah Rodriguez from Gulf Coast Holdings called my personal phone at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. Rob, I know you can't discuss Hartman business, but we just received a compliance notice from the Railroad Commission. Something about our pipeline permits. Devin filed what he called a standard response, but the potential fine is $2.3 million. I'd seen dozens of these notices. The Texas Railroad Commission had started aggressive enforcement of new pipeline safety regulations 6 months ago. Companies had 60 days to remediate or face escalating penalties. Sarah, I can't provide legal advice without proper representation, but as a friend, I'd suggest you get specialized pipeline counsel to review that notice immediately. Can you recommend someone? Send me the notice. No charge for a friend to take a look and point you in the right direction. The document arrived within minutes. One glance told me everything. Gulf Coast's pipeline monitoring systems weren't compliant with the new federal standards. Devin had filed a boilerplate response completely missing the technical compliance requirements. They had 12 days left to fix a problem that would take 30 days minimum to resolve properly. Sarah, you need emergency pipeline counsel today. This isn't routine paperwork. You're looking at potential criminal violations if this isn't handled correctly. By Thursday of week 3, I'd received similar calls from 8 other clients. Each crisis followed the same pattern: complex regulatory issues, Devin's incompetent responses, millions in potential exposure. Week 4 brought the call I'd been expecting. Patricia Caldwell, her voice tight with controlled fury. Rob, the Caldwell acquisition closed, but there's a critical environmental disclosure issue. Devon missed a new EPA requirement that went into effect last month. We're looking at a $12 million liability that should have been identified during due diligence. Our board is demanding answers, the environmental disclosure. A new EPA requirement that had gone into effect 3 months ago. I'd flagged it in my personal deal notes, but those notes were in my files, not Hartman's system. Patricia, I can't discuss specifics about your transaction, but after my 30-day restriction period ends next week, I'd be happy to review your situation as an independent consultant. Would Bailey & Associates be interested in representing us on this matter? Bailey & Associates, the boutique firm that handled sophisticated corporate work with a fraction of Hartman's overhead. Martin Bailey had been trying to recruit me for years, usually over drinks at the Union Bar downtown. I think they might be very interested in discussing your needs. The 30-day mark hit on a Friday. That afternoon, I called Martin Bailey. Rob Matthews. I've been wondering when you'd call. Interested in discussing some potential opportunities? I think we might have some mutual interest to explore. Come in Monday morning. And Rob, bring your golf clubs. I think we need to have a long conversation about the future. Monday morning at Bailey & Associates felt like stepping into a different world. Where Hartman Legal was all marble and intimidation, Bailey's office had the comfortable efficiency of a firm that cared more about results than appearances. Martin Bailey, 68 years old with 40 years of practice under his belt, had built his reputation by being smart instead of flashy. Rob Matthews, he said, standing up from behind a desk that actually looked used. I've been wondering when you'd finally leave that circus. I didn't exactly leave voluntarily. Ashley Hartman called me last week, Martin said, his tone dry as West Texas. Warned me about a former employee who might try to violate his non-compete. Suggested that any firm that helped you would face litigation. My stomach tightened. And your response? I told her Bailey & Associates doesn't respond well to threats, especially hollow ones from children playing dress-up in daddy's suits. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Coffee? We've got a lot to discuss. Over the next hour, Martin laid out his proposal. Senior counsel position, not partner initially. That kept me clear of any non-compete issues. 60-40 split in my favor. Full malpractice coverage and litigation support when Hartman inevitably came after me. The thing is, Rob, I've been getting calls. Patricia Caldwell, Mike Thompson, others. They're not happy with the service they're getting. But they're also scared. Nobody wants to be the first to jump ship and face Ashley's litigation threats. So what are you suggesting? That we make jumping ship feel less like jumping and more like boarding a luxury yacht. Martin smiled. I've got an idea, but it requires some finesse. That afternoon, I found myself at River Oaks Country Club, not for golf, but for what Martin called strategic coffee meetings. The plan was simple. Let word spread naturally through Houston's business community that Bailey & Associates was expanding their energy practice. The first meeting was with Jim Harrison from Baker Oil and Gas, whom I'd known for 12 years through the Energy Bar Association. We sat on the clubhouse terrace overlooking the course, discussing everything except Hartman Legal. Rob, I heard you're exploring new opportunities, Jim said, cutting straight to the point after we'd covered the usual pleasantries about his son's law school applications. Martin Bailey made me an offer I'm seriously considering. Good firm, solid reputation. How would that work with your current situation? Clean break, all above board. I served my 30-day notice period, maintained all ethical obligations. Jim nodded slowly. You know, Baker's been having some issues with our current counsel. Nothing against Hartman personally, but lately, he trailed off diplomatically. That evening, Martin called with an update. 3 more companies called this afternoon, words getting around. By Wednesday, the crisis calls were coming in faster than I could handle them properly. Sarah Rodriguez from Gulf Coast Holdings called with an emergency. The Railroad Commission had escalated their penalty to $4.7 million after Devon filed another inadequate response. Sarah, I can't represent you while I'm still bound by agreements, but I know someone who can help immediately. Can you work with them on this? As of next Monday, yes. That same day, Patricia Caldwell called with worse news. Rob, the EPA is opening a formal investigation into the Caldwell acquisition. They're claiming we knowingly concealed environmental liabilities. This could trigger criminal charges. For the first time in our conversation, I heard fear in her voice. Patricia Caldwell was one of the toughest executives in Houston, the kind of woman who'd built a billion-dollar company from her father's struggling pipeline business. If she was scared, the situation was genuinely dire. Patricia, you need specialized environmental counsel immediately. This isn't something Devin can handle with Google searches. Will you take the case? I'll be at Bailey and Associates starting Monday. We can discuss representation then. Thursday brought the call I'd been expecting but dreading. William Hartman himself. Robert. The voice was older than I remembered, strained in a way that made me think he'd been getting similar calls all week. We need to talk. Mr. Hartman, how can I help you? You know exactly how. My firm is hemorrhaging clients. 23 companies have terminated our representation in 2 weeks. This has to stop, sir. Those companies made their own decisions about legal representation. I haven't solicited anyone. Don't insult my intelligence. This is coordinated. This is revenge. I thought about Ashley and her meditation corner, about Devin playing games while deals collapsed, about 25 years of loyalty repaid with humiliation. Mr. Hartman, this is consequences. Your daughter replaced me with someone who thinks pipeline safety regulations are bureaucratic suggestions. A long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. I'll handle Ashley. Come back. Name your terms. Full partnership, your own division, whatever you want. It's too late for that. It's never too late. I built this firm from nothing. I won't watch it die because of my daughter's mistakes. You should have thought about that before you let someone who views law as disruptive innovation run your practice. Robert, please. What do you want? Money? Clients? I'll give you anything. The desperation in his voice was genuine, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. William had built something impressive over 47 years, but he'd also made the choice to step away and leave it in incompetent hands. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Hartman. I just want to practice law competently for clients who deserve better than what they've been getting. After I hung up, I sat in my temporary office at Bailey & Associates looking out at the Houston skyline. My phone showed 14 missed calls from various Hartman partners, 23 text messages from former clients, and an email from the Houston Business Journal requesting comment about the ongoing exodus from Hartman Legal. I declined to comment, but the article ran anyway the next morning. Sources indicate the departures began after the firm terminated a senior attorney who had maintained relationships with most of the departing clients. They didn't use my name, but every lawyer in Houston knew exactly what was happening. By Friday afternoon, Martin was grinning like a man who'd just won the lottery. 31 companies have either terminated Hartman or requested proposals from us. 31 out of what, 63 total clients? Something like that. Rob, I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's not just that they're leaving Hartman, they're specifically asking for you by name. That evening, Thomas texted me from inside the collapsing firm. Emergency partners meeting tomorrow. Ashley's in full panic mode. Devin quit this afternoon. Said the stress was affecting his chakras. Word is William's flying back from his cruise early. I set the phone down and poured myself a scotch. Ashley Hartman had wanted innovation and disruption. She'd gotten both, just not the way she'd planned. Through my window, I could see the lights of downtown Houston beginning to flicker on. Somewhere out there, Ashley was probably realizing that running a law firm required more than MBA buzzwords and good intentions. And somewhere else, 31 corporate executives were sleeping, better knowing their legal matters would be handled by people who actually understood what they were doing. The call that ended everything came on a Tuesday morning, 10 weeks after Ashley had fired me. I was in my new Bailey & Associates office, a corner space with actual windows and room for my law books, when my assistant knocked. Mr. Matthews, Channel 11 wants a comment. Hartman Legal just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I turned on the conference room TV. The anchor was mid-sentence. Confirmed that the 87-year-old law firm has filed for emergency reorganization after losing approximately 76% of their Fortune 500 client base over the past 2 months. The firm's rapid decline is attributed to what sources describe as catastrophic management decisions by recently installed leadership. The screen showed Ashley Hartman outside the federal courthouse, flanked by lawyers from Bradford & Associates, the firm that specialized in corporate crisis management. She looked nothing like the confident MBA who'd fired me 10 weeks ago. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a conservative suit that seemed borrowed. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She was still just 29 years old, thrust into a position she'd never been prepared for, surrounded by advisors who were either incompetent or afraid to tell her the truth. No comment, she repeated to reporters, but one journalist persisted. Ms. Hartman, is it true that unlicensed staff were handling multi-million-dollar transactions? How do you respond to malpractice claims from 18 different companies? Ashley made the critical mistake of stopping, of trying to defend decisions that were indefensible. This is a coordinated attack orchestrated by competitors who— Are you referring to Robert Matthews, the attorney your firm terminated 10 weeks ago? Another reporter interrupted. This isn't about any individual. Sources indicate Mr. Matthews was responsible for maintaining relationships with most of the clients who have since departed. Can you comment on the circumstances of his termination? Ashley's composure finally cracked. We made strategic decisions about the future direction of the firm. Sometimes that requires difficult personnel choices. The camera zoomed in as she essentially confirmed on live television that my firing had been a strategic decision rather than performance-related, potentially undermining any remaining legal claims they might have had against me. Martin Bailey appeared in my doorway, shaking his head. She just made her lawyers' jobs 10 times harder. It's painful to watch, I said. And it was, not because I felt vindicated, but because watching a century-old institution collapse was genuinely tragic, regardless of who caused it. My phone rang. William Hartman, for the 3rd time this week. Robert. His voice was barely above a whisper. It's over. The bankruptcy judge wants a complete accounting of what happened. The state bar opened an investigation into Ashley's management practices. My life's work is gone. I felt a surprising pang of sympathy for the old man. Mr. Hartman, I'm genuinely sorry it came to this. Are you? Are you really? I thought about it honestly. Yes, I am. Your father built something worth respecting. You continued that tradition for 40 years. What happened these past months doesn't erase that legacy. The bankruptcy trustee wants to liquidate everything. 87 years of legal precedent, client relationships, institutional knowledge, sold to pay debts created in 10 weeks. What about the employees, the people who had nothing to do with Ashley's decisions? Some will find positions elsewhere. Thomas is already interviewing. Most of the others, he trailed off. Good lawyers, Robert. People who deserved better leadership than my daughter provided. That afternoon, Martin called an emergency partners meeting. The mood in the room was surprisingly somber rather than celebratory. Hartman's bankruptcy trustee approached us about acquiring their energy practice assets, Martin announced. Client files, research databases, that sort of thing. But more importantly, they want us to consider hiring their displaced attorneys. How many people are we talking about? Asked Janet Walsh, our senior litigator. Potentially 14 lawyers, 6 paralegals, support staff. They're good people caught in a bad situation. Over the next week, I found myself in the strange position of interviewing my former colleagues. Thomas was first, looking older than I remembered, but relieved to be away from the chaos. Rob, I owe you an apology, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I knew what Ashley was doing was wrong, but I thought I could manage the damage until William came back. You were trying to protect your people. I understand that. Still, I should have spoken up when she fired you. We all should have. But she'd made it clear that anyone over 45 was going to be transitioned out anyway. Would standing up to her have made a difference? Thomas shook his head. Probably not. She'd already decided that the firm's problems were caused by legacy thinking and generational resistance to change. Anyone who disagreed was proof of the problem. By Friday, Bailey and Associates had extended offers to 8 of Hartman's former attorneys and 4 paralegals. The rest found positions with other Houston firms. Even in bankruptcy, genuinely competent lawyers remained in demand. The final settlement hearing was held the following Tuesday. I attended as a witness, not a party. My lawyer had advised that showing up demonstrated confidence in our position. William Hartman sat alone at the petitioner's table. Ashley was notably absent, reportedly meeting with state bar investigators about possible sanctions. Your Honor, the bankruptcy trustee explained, the debtor's assets have been successfully transferred to Bailey and Associates and 2 other firms. All displaced employees have been placed in new positions. The remaining question is the disposition of $6.2 million in outstanding malpractice claims. The judge looked at William. "Mr. Hartman, do you have anything to say before I approve this settlement?" William stood slowly, every one of his 71 years visible in his posture. "Your Honor, I built this firm 47 years ago with the belief that law was about service, serving clients, serving justice, serving the community. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of those principles." He paused, gathering himself. "I let my daughter believe that innovation was more important than competence, that disruption was more valuable than dedication. The lawyers at Bailey and Associates didn't destroy Hartman Legal. We destroyed ourselves through arrogance and poor judgment." His voice strengthened slightly. "They simply refused to participate in our destruction." 6 months later, I stood in my permanent corner office at Bailey and Associates. I'd made partner after successfully transitioning 47 former Hartman clients to our firm. Thomas was across the hall as a senior associate, handling regulatory compliance with his usual methodical precision. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad, made Dean's List again. Thanks for showing me that setbacks can become comebacks." Another from Patricia Caldwell. "Rob, the board approved our nomination of Bailey and Associates for Law Firm of the Year from the Houston Business Journal. Well deserved." Even one from my mother's care coordinator. "Mr. Matthews, your mother wanted me to tell you she's proud of how you handled your career transition with such grace." I sat back in my chair, looking out over Houston's skyline. The Hartman building was now occupied by a medical practice. Ironic, given that they'd once claimed to be healing the legal profession. Ashley Hartman had taught me the most important lesson of my legal career. Competence and relationships matter more than innovation and disruption. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them. At 52, I wasn't just surviving my mid-career crisis. I was thriving because of the way I'd handled it. The golf games with clients at Memorial Park continued. The monthly Energy Bar Association meetings at the Petroleum Club remained productive. The relationships built over 25 years had proven more durable than any single firm's letterhead. That's what practicing law was really about. Not revenge or destruction, but competence, relationships, and protecting what matters. Sometimes that meant letting the incompetent destroy themselves while you focused on building something better. Even when building that better future meant watching an 87-year-old institution collapse because someone confused change with improvement and disruption with progress.